And
Good,
I think
Good evening, sir.
good
I think
evening,
it's
sir.
it's a very special
Good evening.
invitation from Royal College
Good evening.
Society, because most of the time that the kids are looking at when they wanted to become, when they wanted to what do you want them to be when they grow up, and so most of the time your parents will push you to become a doctor, engineer, lawyer. There are set of so-called accepted professions in Sri Lankan context, and other than that, accountants and very popular set of professions that your parents are pushing for you to become. But there are other areas in the world, in the global context, that are popular, and then have a sort of a very good career opportunities, career prospects in many other fields. So one area that you all have decided for me to talk is how to become a wildlife biologist. I think it's very good that you have picked me, and then because I was trained as a wildlife biologist in US for a long time, and then I have so much of experience, 35 years of experience working with the animals and conservation and many other aspects. And also I work for international conservation agencies to local conservation agencies, universities, and now I'm with the private sector. So I can talk a lot in terms of the benefits, and what you can do as a wildlife biologist. So number one, this presentation is very short. Short means I'm going to talk about the main points, and then we'll have a time for discussion, so that you may have a lot of questions, so that we can discuss those questions in terms of your passion and things like that. Okay, sure. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the main point is, we have to ask yourself, if you want to become a wildlife biologist, who is wildlife biologist? That's a fundamental question that anybody would ask. If you don't know the subject, if you think and you hear, these wildlife biologists, very interesting things, but who is the wildlife biologist? Basically, a person who has the training and skills to manage the land for the betterment of the other living thing organisms that we share. Basically, you are going to get training professionally, and some of the skills. The training is one thing, the skills are another thing. And to manage the land. Land is the areas that we are sharing with animals and plants and forest and many other things. So it doesn't matter whether it's a small animals, big species, or whatever it is. Everything we have to treat them equally. So that is what your training and skill is going to be. uh, Basically, you're trying to learn uh, the biology of animals. Ecology means the interaction between the animals and the natural environment, population dynamics, and their ranging behavior. So many things. These are all fun subjects to learn. And then you have to look at the areas that animals are living, areas that humans are living, and what are the areas that we are sharing with wildlife, and what are the impacts from both human impacts and the natural impacts, like the climate change that we are talking about. So those kind of things are also important as a wildlife biologist. And then the research aspect. You need to learn about the research and research findings, and how do you apply those research findings for the scientific management of the land. So that's basically, when you're looking at a wildlife biologist, that's the sort of I can put uh, the entire career thing in these few lines. Okay, So let's go to the next slide. So then you will ask yourself, can I become a wildlife biologist? Of course, anybody can become a wildlife biologist if you get the training and skills that I have mentioned, and I'll discuss that training and skills in the next few slides also. But the best thing is to look at whether you have a passion for nature, wildlife, and their existence, their conservation. And that is very important than many other jobs, because you are looking at, if you have the passion, of course, your job is going to be better. You will be satisfied with the job. Otherwise, this is very, there are difficult tasks that you have to do. We'll discuss that later on. And ask yourself, do I have a passion for nature, passion for animals, passion for conservation, passion for caring them? That is very important. Yes, it is a job, it is a profession, but at the same time, this passion inside, in you, is very important for you to become a successful wildlife biologist. And you ask yourself whether you have that, and ask your parents, ask your teachers, and then you will show some sort of these kind of signs that you have a love of animal, love of outdoor, and those kind of people uh, will perform better as a wildlife biologist, because that is in their system. And for you to ask yourself and test yourself, best thing is to volunteer at an environmental related agency or a project. um, Even as a youngster, like 10-year-old boy, 15-year-old boy, it doesn't matter. You go to a zoo, you go to a small agency and volunteer, start a volunteer program, maybe a weekend program, maybe 3 weeks, maybe 1 month, during your school holidays, and see for yourself whether I have the passion for nature and animals and caring and things like that. So that is number one. I would say that people who will perform better when you have that kind of passion. So then, if you have the passion, then you obtain the training and skills for you to become a profession in wildlife biology. Some people like me, it was my hobby and passion, and then I obtained my training and skills, and then became my profession for a better profession. So my life my profession has a better job satisfaction, because my job became my profession. So then, of course, you can't complain. That is very important for any job, because if you have a passion, or for you to become a doctor, for you to become a management person, for you to become any other person, uh, then you will perform your job much better than the average person. I know some of my friends who became doctors, but then gave up their medicine practice, because later on they found out, well, the medicine is not for me. I don't have a passion. I don't have a drive. I don't have a what do you call, the satisfaction for me to become a doctor. So they gave up medicine and did something else. So those kind of things are very important for you in terms of your future prospect. How you be, what who to whom, what is the profession that you're going to select. That is important. Go to the next slide, sir, please. So there are two things. That one thing is, you can gain knowledge about wildlife, and also what are the knowledge that you want to uh, gain for you to become a wildlife biologist as a profession. So that is two different things. To learn about the wildlife and the wilderness and animals and things like that. That is a simple knowledge gain. That is, you don't dive deep, and then you are trying to learn it just to for your own pleasure. So that, of course, there are short courses in wildlife science in some universities in Sri Lanka and many other parts of the world also. Those are called short courses, not for you to become a profession, but to gain some knowledge about scientific aspects of wildlife science. And then the reading popular articles, you will gain a lot of knowledge. And then if you gain a little bit of knowledge about science, and then you can read some of the scientific papers on wildlife to gain knowledge. And nature related documentaries is a very popular way to gain knowledge of wildlife and the conservation, and that is very popular around the world. You know how many documentaries are there in the BBC, National Geographic, Animal Planet, and those kind of huge production houses, fantastic programs. And then knowledge-based talks, workshops, and events. Those are very important. There are a lot of things in the web, in the digital media these days, so that you can join and sort of listen to these professionals, listen to some of the research work, and then.
Sir, can you run conservation projects without getting permission from the
Uh,
biological
it
department?
it depends on what type of conservation programs that you conduct. If there are, for example, if you don't collect anything from the wild, if you don't collect plants, if you don't collect uh, animals or anything, you don't have to get permission. For example, these are called, there are some programs it's called observational studies, right? So that if you go to uh, parks or whatever it is, Yala or Wilpath or something, you do an observational study of leopards. For that, you don't need permission. But one thing, if you obtain a permission, there is a what do you call the credential part. Then you develop a good proposal, and then you submit it to the Department of Wildlife Conservation or the Forest Department, and then that will give you a better sort of a recognition in the scientific field, and that you are doing this conservation program very scientifically. So that is, the approval process is very important. So they will look at all the aspects so that they will grant the permission. You understand what I explained? Huh?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So yeah, you can do some conservation programs, but depending on what scale, um,
So, how
conservation.
do you get the permission?
Well, the permission process is very long, but you have to submit a proposal depending on what are the things that you're talking about, the area that you're talking about, you're working on, and then you go to the either Department of Wildlife Conservation or the Forest Department, and there's a research committee, and then you apply your proposal to the research committee, and then research committee will review it, and then based on your proposal, based on your suggestions, based on your things that you do, they will grant permission for you to conduct the conservation program. So it all depending on what you do. So that is the key, right? Whether it's a large scale conservation program or a small scale conservation program, it doesn't matter. But number one, they will assess you what are the things that you will do in the field in terms of conservation activity.
Okay, sir.
Sir, and
Go
excuse
ahead,
me,
please.
sir.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, sir, is it possible to
Yeah.
basically like collect animals from non-protected areas, like small animals, and breed them and release the like babies to like increase the population?
No, that is a very good question that you asked. And in Sri Lankan context, most of the animals are protected. It doesn't matter whether they live in the protected area or whether they live in your backyard, right? So in the legal process, there are animals that are called non-protected animals. Very few, like the crows and the pigs and the animals that are considered as a pests, the malagiravas and very few animals. Everything else is protected in the face of legal arena in Sri Lanka, right? So you are
Yeah,
not supposed to. Sorry, you are not supposed to collect those animals. If you want to collect it for a breeding program, yes, your program is very very what you call the very well-worthy program, but it doesn't matter. You have to obtain the permission from the Department of Wildlife Conservation.
So even insects and stuff, are they protected?
Technically, yes. Technically, yes. Okay. I can't see the presentation, so let's look at. I will sort of, I was talking about the gain knowledge, and then for what are the type of knowledge that you want to gain for you to become a wildlife biologist, right? So basically, there are science degrees, basic degrees, bachelor's, and then you go to the master's level. Good. And then if you really want to go further, you can go to the PhD level, and then you can become a either teacher or professor in teaching wildlife science. So the basic bachelor's course, it's included ecology. Ecology means the interaction between the animals and the environment. Animal behavior is a big part. Genetics, genetic is a big part of everything today. Zoology, botany, limnology. Limnology is a subject called wetland. You're studying about the wetlands, the fish, and other small animals that are living in the wetlands. Population dynamics, how their populations are increasing, decreasing, vanishing, getting extinct. So many things. How does it happen? Why does it happen? That sort of analysis is very important. Chemistry is a big part. Geology is a big part, because everything is depending on the earth, the areas that we're talking about. Biogeography is a subject, very interesting subject, that you're looking at the 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 what do you call the dispersal of the animals, dispersal of the different species historically and today. So that's a very interesting subject, how they distributed in the space. In this biogeography part, you're looking at the historical aspects as well. Why the dinosaurs were existed, and then why they have gone extinct without human presence. So that kind of things, there are very interesting things will teach you in the biogeography. GIS means Geographical Information System, which is the very high tech system, by analyzing the land and their land use patterns and everything, by using the satellite technology. So this is a very high tech science. Now they are incorporated into the wildlife science also, because it is easier sometimes applying these kind of new technologies for the betterment of wildlife. Then immobilization. Immobilization means how do you tranquilize animals, the elephants or whatever it is, for research purposes and things like that. That is a very important part. Most of the time, people think that the veterinary science, veterinary people do it, but for the wildlife science, that is part of the wildlife biologist job. The wildlife health, what kind of diseases that the animals have, how does that diseases are jumping into the human. Now that is the subject that we are talking with the COVID-19. No, so I think everybody is aware that how this COVID-19 has jumped from the animals to the human. So that's a new that's a sort of a new subject for general public, but that is a subject that we get taught in the university under the wildlife health. So many different diseases carrying by wildlife. For example, 99% of the bats carry rabies, but they don't have any effect from rabies. But just imagine if we get the rabies, that's the end of the story. So those kind of things, new science, new genetic science, new science, it's called zoonotic disease, is very important now. That's a new area of emerging area for professionals to learn. Fire science, what happened to the fire, to the land, and whether fire is a part of the management. Those things are very important. And the habitat management, how do you manage the land, how do you land management is the key for wildlife science program. So let's go to the next one. Shoaib? Okay, so if you want to become that's the sort of academic part that I was talking about. And then the skills part is very important. What are the skills that you want to develop? So that's one thing, the academic part, then the skills. Any profession, these two combination is very important. The observation skill is very important in terms of for you to become wildlife science, because if you see something, then you are trying to ask question by yourself, why this is happening, what is the reason for it to happen like this, why these animals are moving from one area to the other during the season. So those kind of observations are important for you to understand the land, animals, and their interaction. Critical thinking is very important. Of course, any profession, critical thinking is very important. Not just things that you see, and the underlying causes. That is what the critical thinking is all about. And looking at the new ways of solving problems. That is another part that you need to develop, problem solving part. Communication is extremely important in today's world, both written and verbal communication. If you really listen to some of the trained rangers in US or any other parts of the developed world, you will see how professional they are in terms of their communication, both written and verbal, because you need to understand the science, and then you communicate with both scientific community as well as the general public. That is the important part. Now, this is a new area. This is called flying skills, the helicopter and light aircraft. If you want to become a wildlife scientist, sometimes in other parts of the world, they will ask whether you want to have the flying skills, the helicopters or light aircraft. Why? Because some of the areas are extremely large. In Sri Lanka, we don't have large national parks, large protected areas. But if you go to any other part of the world, Africa, United States of America, even UK and New Zealand, Australia, massive outbacks, and those areas, the rangers, the wildlife biologists are operating in helicopters and light aircraft, so to do their jobs. And then the flying skills are very important, and sometimes even the control the fire. The helicopters are being used, and most of these helicopters and light aircrafts are using by the flying rangers. They call it flying rangers. It's a very fun job, but you have the wildlife science degree, plus you have the flying skills for you to become a flying ranger. So that's another skill. Photography skills, very important. If you have the camera skills, then you record everything. Your camera will become a notebook to changing the habitat, to change with the time what's happening, and that sort of things. You can record these changes. At the same time, you can see different behaviors of the animals and things like that. That also, the photography skills are very important for you to communicate also. Now this particular picture, you can see we are coloring elephant. This is called GIS, geographical info color. Elephant collar is fitted with the GIS high-tech satellite collar. So every 4 hours, you get the signal to the satellite, and satellite will download it to our computers. So these are the new techniques that we are using to manage elephants. Why? We can't go behind these animals 24 hours a day. And then by keeping this type of colors with the elephant, and then you will understand their normal behavior. Where do they go? Where do they stop? And what are the routes that they are taking? That is extremely important, as I mentioned earlier, to manage the land, because we are looking at the land, and then how the animals are using the land, so that everything we can keep everything intact. So go to the next. So these are the type of skills that you need to develop for you to become a professional wildlife biologist. Go to the next slide. Let's look at the career option. How, for example, as I said earlier, if you have the passion, you go to the university and get your degree and maybe get your master's level, and then develop your skills whilst you are in the university through internships and then many other things in the university. And then what are the career options? Of course, when you go to any other parts of the world, especially in UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and some of the South African countries, the wildlife biologists are very high paying jobs. High paying jobs means, I can talk about US because I was trained in US, and I worked there, and it's a very high paying job. $6,000 to $7,000 a month starting salary. So that's a very high paying job and very prestigious job. But at the same time, for the first few years of your career, you will mostly work in the outdoor, which is a fun part of life. And then later on, with your experience, and you may go to the managerial positions by managing this thing from the office environment and things like that. But you have to start as a outdoor person, work in the outdoor, work with the animals, work with people, work with many conditions, sometimes challenging, but it's a fun part of the job. That is where the real satisfaction comes from. So I enjoyed my first 10 years of my career because I worked tirelessly in the field. Now I'm mostly sort of a managerial position and sitting in the air conditioned room and managing things. But that's a fun part of it. And there are career options in international and local conservation agencies. International conservation agencies like the World Wildlife Fund, Conservation International, and then IUCN, which I worked earlier. Those are massive organizations. They are operating many parts of the world, many countries in the world, and they have country offices in almost every country that they're operating. And then you have opportunities to work in many parts of the world. So that's a fantastic career option for a wildlife biologist. And there are some local conservation agencies also, small conservation agencies that you can actually work. There are options in the private sector to work. Now, for example, now I'm working for private sector, John Keel's Holdings, by managing the wildlife tourism arm. So that is the new areas that the private sector also looking at, how to bring the science into the tourism and things like that. So those options, those new career options are also opening. If you're really qualified, of course, you can work independent researcher with many grant options. For example, you submit a grant, and then you submit your own proposals to the authorities and get your clearances, and then work as independent researchers. There are a lot of these kind of independent researchers in Sri Lanka and also in the world, and they're doing fantastic job because the science that they bring out is extremely helpful for the managers, for the authorities to manage the land. So that is the idea of independent researchers. And then sometimes there are new documentary productions, as I mentioned earlier. Animal Planet, BBC, National Geographic. These documentary productions, they are looking at technical advices. The person who has a knowledge and skills on the animals, the natural history of animals. Those kind of opportunities also there. So these are very fun part of the job for some of wildlife biologists. And there are areas that you can diversify even if you become a qualified wildlife biologist. You can go to the marine side for you to become a marine biologist, and you can work with the mammals, large mammals, small mammals, birds, fish, and insects. Insects is entomology, fish is another area of work. So there are so many areas that you can work as a career wildlife biologist, you don't have to work only with the large animals, but also with the small ones, the reptiles, the snakes. So many options are there for you to specialize within the field, and for you to become for you to develop a sort of a career option, or as an independent researcher in to developing a new area of work. So that's sort of a, some of the career options as a wildlife biologist. Let's go to the other slide, Choy, please. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a sort of a fun job, but you can see there are a lot of wildlife personalities who have actually done tremendous work in the field. I have uh, I have selected few because my personal preference, of course, the Charles Darwin, considered as the top naturalist in the world because of his developing a theory of evolution. We still getting strengthened even after so many centuries. That his theory, and then Alfred Russel Wallace. Alfred Russel Wallace is also another person, very unpopular, not as popular as Charles Darwin, but he also worked in the theory of evolution in the area, in the countries in the Asia, Indonesian archipelago, and fantastic person. You go to the web and learn about him, Alfred Russel Wallace. Some people think that he's one who developed the theory of evolution than before Charles Darwin, but that's a debate for all of us to getting into. But that's an area that you can actually learn and you know see what they have done. And then Alfred Wagner is a fantastic person who has actually uh, got the idea of theory of plate tectonics, how the world was in a one chunk of land so many millions years ago, 150, 200 million years ago, and then slowly started drifting. Now his theory is also happening in front of our eyes because the small observation between the South America and the Africa, he looked at, my God, look at South American coastline and the African coastline is like a part of the puzzle. And then from there, he actually went on and on and on and developed that theory of plate tectonics. And we are still learning about it. Biogeography, as I mentioned earlier, is a big part of that plate tectonics and things like that. Jane Goodall is a fantastic primatologist who has worked tirelessly so many years in Gombe National Park in Africa. And then he has so much of work done for the conservation of orangutans. A fantastic story, one of the best successful conservation stories in the world. She's a lady who actually came to work as a secretary to one of the professors, and then she got to know that this is my passion. I love animals, and then she went on and learned the wildlife part, and then became a top class, world class primatologist and the conservationist. She's continuously spend her entire life for the conservation of orangutans in Africa. Diane Fossey is another primatologist. She's single-handedly tried to address the issues of largest ape in the world, which is the mountain gorillas. They are living in one mountain in Africa, only one mountain in Africa, only 700 left for the whole world. She went all by herself to the mountain of Virunga and then started working. But unfortunately, because of the people who were killing mountain gorillas and selling their body parts to many parts of the world, thought that she's a problem, so they basically massacred her in the Virunga mountain. But her work is continuing, and because the life she has sacrificed actually helped to bring the world attention, the world conservation attention towards the mountain gorillas. So many conservation agencies got together and came forward, and now the gorillas are somewhat protected. and their population is bouncing back, and that's a good news. So she's, I would consider, as a one of the top conservationists in the world, but unfortunately she has given her life for the betterment of the mountain gorillas in Africa. E.O. Wilson, I would consider as a present day of Charles Darwin. He's an entomologist. He has worked his life with insects most of the time, and then he has also developed a new theory called island biogeography theory, and he's also considered as a father of biodiversity that we are talking about today. He's also continuing to put his time and effort for the conservation of many species around the world. Cynthia Moss, another conservationist, elephant expert, who is working in Africa, Amboseli National Park with the elephants. Sir David Attenborough, we all know how he has become a conservation ambassador. He's not a scientist, but he has become a iconic ambassador for conservation for animals because of his communication skills and so many documentaries that he presented to the world, and he managed to snatch the heart and minds of millions of people and bring them into the conservation. So I would consider him as a top conservation ambassador in the world. So these are some of the wildlife personalities I sort of admire, and then throughout my career also. So we continue to learn new things, and then Sri Lanka also can produce few people like Dr. Prithviraj Fernando, who has working in elephants for the last 35 years. Asha DeVos, a young marine biologist who is working with whales. So these kind of personalities are also there, and then you also can become like this one day. It's all about training, skills, and then new areas to work, and then go to the world and show your work, and then you will also recognize like this. So everything start from with the small one step, and then but slowly it will ball, and then become a big programs. And that's how every single one of these people have started very small, and but they have done tremendous work in the world of conservation. So with that, I'll stop my presentation